And all right. Appears that we are live now. Hooray. So now I get to officially introduce y'all to Mr. Bob Burg. And I have to tell you, friends, like how this thing came to be, because this is something that I teach y'all all the time about going after what it is that you want. And so I've been a huge fan of Bob's for years and years. His book, The Go-Giver, I think it was one of the very first business books that I actually read, because I got a late start to entrepreneurship. And it was so easy to read, just a profound parable. And we actually ended up creating a Go-Giver Award back in 2013 that we would award annually to the person that embodied the principles of the Go-Giver. So it was really interesting that the universe brought several signs to me about Bob. And finally, I decided, you know what? I really want to connect with him, only to find out that, y'all, he wrote a book on influence, Go-Giver Influencer. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I write Unstoppable Influence, and then this legend writes this book along with John David Mann called The Go-Giver Influencer. And I'm like, that's it. I have got to do something. And one of the lessons I learned very early on in business, in my entrepreneurial career, is if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And so I decided, what the heck? I am going to reach out and I'm going to see if I could possibly convince Bob to pencil in a few minutes to come and talk to you all about influence. And lo and behold, he was gracious enough to say yes. And so I'm just absolutely beyond thrilled at this opportunity. Now, I want to tell you all a little bit about Bob, for those of you that may have been hidden under a rock for a little while, because this guy is truly a legend. I'm not trying to make you blush, but he's really big, guys. And so in their best-selling parable, The Go-Giver, and then the follow-up, The Go-Giver, Bob Burg and John David Mann challenged the conventional wisdom about success. And now they're back with this brand new book about the power of genuine influence. And this is talking about the paradox of achieving what you want by focusing on the other person's interest, which is really interesting. And it's not in a way that's like you're being, self-sacrificial, but in a way that all parties truly win-win. So Bob speaks all over the world on topics related to the Go-Giver, as well as what he calls genuine influence. And his total book sales are well over 1 million. Y'all, the Go-Giver, that very first parable, has sold over 700,000 copies and has truly inspired the Go-Giver movement, as evidenced by the fact that we have in our own community the Go-Giver Award. But I have to tell you that this Go-Giver Influencer book may be their most important book of all. And that's why I'm really excited to have Bob here with us today to talk about influence. So, Bob, first of all, I would love for you to tell me and the audience what inspired y'all to write the Go-Giver Influencer.
Well, I feel almost a little intimidated talking about influence, because you wrote the book on influence, and I actually have that in my queue of books to read. I can't wait to. And our dear friends Terry Murphy and Don Hudson had been recommending you highly anyway. So you're kind of a legend to me. So as you're saying all these nice things about me, it's like, I'm rubber, you're glue. Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you. Aren't I a baby? And so what did inspire us to write the book? And it's a great question, because influence has played a role in every one of the Go-Giver books so far. In the original, The Go-Giver, there was the law of influence, which was law number 3. In the Go-Giver Leader, the follow-up parable, it was a little story about the power of leadership and influence. Well, this time we decided to really drive it deep. and make it all about influence. And one of the reasons is because we felt that in today's times, in this country and probably in many others, whether it's between family members, friends, business associates, coworkers, politicians, political pundits, and of course the tens of millions of people on social media, today's discussions are no longer discussions, but rather fueled up, hate-filled, vitriol-spewing diatribes of personal insults. But, people are not being influenced, right? People aren't coming to different conclusions. People aren't changing their minds. Nobody hears someone insulting them and then saying, "Oh, thank you for pointing out the error of my ways. I totally have believed what I believe for all my life, but now that you've insulted me like that, I'm ready to change." And so we kind of thought we'd like to come up with something that would show people how to communicate in a way that was that was kinder, that was nicer, that was more tactful, diplomatic. Sure, that's fine, but that's not all it is. Also in a way that would move people to action, right? And that's really the key, because if you're not moving people to action, you're not influencing anyone. And I think right now the world needs people who can influence.
I love that. And I totally agree. And for those of you that have followed me and we talk about the power of influence, I think that it's really important to note that it's all easy peasy when everyone agrees. The question is, what happens when they don't agree? Because a lot of times we surround ourselves with our tribe and we all agree and we all have the same views and beliefs. But that's not the real world. The real world is filled with people that have differing views. So how can you influence in a way that's authentic to you, but actually has the ability of positively impacting someone else's life? And that's why I absolutely love this book. Now, before we dive deep into the Go-Giver Influencer, I would love to know, what inspired y'all to write the first Go-Giver book as a parable? Because I found that I literally have read every single Go-Giver book in one sitting, and each one within one sitting. And the reason is because you do speak and teach in parables, these profound lessons. But what inspired y'all to do the first one as a parable?
Well, many, many years ago, I had a book out called Endless Referrals, which, in fact, our friend Terry Murphy is part of that book. She was mentioned in it as one of the shining examples of what it means to be a business builder and a networker who does it from the heart, does it authentically, does it in a way that benefits everyone involved. And so this book, Endless Referrals, was a how-to book. And it basically showed people who have a business, who are in sales, who are entrepreneurs, how to cultivate relationships with people that would result in people wanting to do business with them and people wanting to refer them to others, how to build the types of relationships, what I call the know, like, and trust relationships that would cause that to happen. And yeah, it's been a big selling book. It's been successful, but I've always loved reading parables. I've always thought, what a great way to connect with a reader, right? To be able to just share a story. And I know all the ones I've read throughout the years, I've read many of them in one sitting because I couldn't stop reading them. And I thought, what if we could take the basic principle, the basic premise of Endless Referrals, which is that all things being equal or close enough to equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust, and put that into parable form. So the first question was, okay, so what is the basic essence or characteristic of someone who builds those kinds of relationships consistently and predictably? And the answer is, well, they're givers. They're always looking for ways to provide value to others. Okay, so I kind of came up with the name the Go-Giver as a playoff against the more common term go-getter. But just for clarification, we love go-getters too, because go-getters are people of action. And you and your husband are both very successful business people, so you can have the greatest intent, the best ideas, the most fantastic thoughts and intentions, but unless action's put into the mix, nothing's going to happen, right? So it can't happen. So we love go-getters. The neat thing is there's no natural division between a go-getter and a go-giver, right? Many go-getters are go-givers, and we would say every go-giver is a go-getter, person of action. So we want people to be go-getters and go-givers. The opposite of a go-giver is a go-taker. That's the person who feels entitled, if you will, to take without having added value to the person, to the process, to the situation. And they tend to be frustrated because they rarely have any kind of success and rarely have sustainable success, right? So we always say, be a go-getter and a go-giver, just not a go-taker. So, but the title worked because it was a play. It was sort of a pattern interrupt off the more prevalent go-getter. Okay, so, however, I did a very sketchy character outline. Okay, it really wasn't much, and I sat down to write it, and it took me about a minute to realize that there is a big difference between writing a how-to book like Endless Referrals and writing a story, a fictional story, based on true principles, but still a story. And I knew it was outside what John Maxwell would later explain to me, outside my strength zone. I wasn't worried about it being outside my comfort zone. But it was outside my strength zone. I knew I couldn't do as good a job with it as it warranted. So I asked John David Mann, who had been my editor-in-chief of a magazine where I used to write. And John, at that time, not as many people knew about John as they do now. He's a very in-demand co-author and ghostwriter. But back then, only a few people knew, relatively few, a specific niche knew about John. Fortunately, I was one of them. And I asked him, and when I say I asked him, I mean I pleaded with him to be the lead writer and main storyteller of the story. So John and I got together on this. Actually, his fiance at the time, now wife, Anna, they were in Tampa visiting her mom. They drove 4 hours across the state. We had about a 4-hour dinner just discussing the story and how it would work out. And he still had to take a few weeks to think about it. But a few weeks later, he called me back and said, I think we've got something here. And, and that happened. So I'm very fortunate that John agreed to do that.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I just love y'all are quite the power duo and are just truly transforming lives and businesses with your wisdom. So let's dive in to talking about influence. So, influence is kind of a buzzword now. Like a lot of people are talking about influence. So in your opinion, from your perspective, what is influence really?
Yeah. And that's such a great question because, before we can really even talk about something, we've all got to be coming from the same direction, let's say, right? And so checking the premise is always so important. I think there are two kind of levels of influence. Okay. There's the basic, on a very, very basic level, we can define influence as simply the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. By definition, that's influence. But while that's its definition, I don't believe that that's the substance or the essence of influence. I think the essence of influence is pull as opposed to push. We've all heard the saying, how far can you push a rope? And the answer is not very far, at least not very fast or very effectively. You can pull it a lot more effective, right? And this is why great influencers don't push. You don't hear people say, wow, that's Susan or that Tom, he is so influential. He has a lot of push with people. No, he or she has a lot of pull with people. That's what influence is. It's an attraction. Great influencers attract people first to themselves and only then to their ideas. And they do this through pull. Now, how do they do that? Well, this is understanding human nature. This is understanding what, on a heart level, what Dale Carnegie said in his awesome classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People. What I believe was the foundational premise of his entire book, Natasha. It's where he wrote, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. So the great influencer, the effective influencer, the genuine influencer constantly ask themselves questions to make sure of their own, to make sure of their own intent. So they'll ask questions such as, how does what I'm asking this person to do, how does it align with their goals, with their wants, their needs, their desires? How does what I want this other person to do, how does it align with their values? And when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, as you said earlier, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another person into doing our will, but as a way to build everyone in the process, now we've come a lot closer to earning that person's commitment rather than trying to depend on some type of compliance, which at best is unsustainable, at worst is totally ineffective. I love what my great friend and a leadership mentor of mine, Dondi Scumaci, says. She says, compliance will never take you where commitment can go.
I love that. I love that. Very powerful and totally in alignment with exactly our view of influence. And I love it. And there are actually within the Go Giver Influencer, y'all, if you've not gotten this book, run, okay? Run and go get this book. But let me tell you, we are going to be giving away one copy of this book at the end of this web class. So stay tuned. But inside of this gem are 5 genuine keys to influence. They are so profound, in fact, that I went and actually printed them out, and they are on my desk. That is what it's something that is an important daily reminder. So, Bob, if we have some time, could we go into the 5 keys and the 5 secrets to genuine influence? Would that be all right? And
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, so the first one now. Oh my gosh, when I read number 1. I was like, I realized, wow, I got some work to do. He must have known me when he wrote rule or secret number 1, which is breathe, master your emotions. Yeah. And so I would love for you to share about that. And I heard that you have something called the seatbelt principle of emotion. So tell me all about that too.
Sure. Well, mastering our emotions is where it all begins. Because it's only when we're in control of our emotions that we're even in the position to be able to take a potentially negative situation or person and turn it into a win for everyone involved. We know this, and yet how often do we allow someone, based on what they say or do, to push our emotional hot buttons, and we become upset, we become frustrated, we become helpless or depressed, we become angry, and we say or do something that is very counterproductive, right? And we know it, and yet we do it anyway. Well, so why is this? Because we're human beings, and as human beings, we are emotional creatures. It's simply how we're built. Now, we'd like to think we're logical, and to a certain extent, of course, we are, but we're pretty emotion driven. As human beings, we make major decisions based on emotion. And we back up those emotional decisions with logic. We rationalize, which if you break up the word in 2, it simply means we tell ourselves rational lies. Okay. And we do this to justify what we've done that we know we probably shouldn't have. Okay. So it's so important that we own, that we control our emotions. Now, please understand, we're not advising anyone to deny their emotions or forego their emotions. First, that it wouldn't make sense logically since we're emotional creatures, but there's also no need for it. Emotions bring us joy. Emotions make life worthwhile. No, that's fine. You just need to make sure you're the master of your emotions as opposed to your emotions being the master of you. This is where the seatbelt principle comes in. My friend Dondi Scumaci said something to us that inspired this in the book. What Dondi said is, by all means, take your emotions along for the ride, but make sure you are driving the car. In other words, you're behind the wheel. You're in control, the logical part of you. Your emotions can come with you, of course, but make sure they are in the passenger side with the seatbelt tightly fastened. As Judge Celia Henshaw, one of the two mentors in the story, because there were two mentors and two proteges, as she advised her protege, Jackson, she said, when you allow your emotions to drive the car, you're putting yourself at the mercy of a drunk driver.
That was so profound. That was so profound.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
So, it's really making sure of this and making this a part of your life, retraining your brain to, as Zig Ziglar used to say, respond as opposed to react. And, once you do that, now you're really headed to big places. When you can control your own emotions and help the other person work effectively within theirs, now your influence goes sky high.
Right. And this is something that doesn't happen overnight. This is, you are blessed for with an opportunity that's going to maybe trigger those emotions. And then you do exactly what Bob just said. Let's put the emotions in the passenger seat, firmly buckle it in, and then act logically. And I know that this is something that will take some work to rewire our brain to think in that way, right?
Yeah, if you'd like, can I take you 2 minutes through a quick exercise that anyone can do that will just provide immeasurable help in this area?
Love it. Would love it.
And this is something I learned to do about 30 years ago when I had a real issue with this. And I realized at this time, unless I really got control of my emotions, my anger, my frustration, I was not going to be able to come close to living up to my potential. So I needed to take a real weakness and turn it into a strength. And so what I did, and what I've taught, many people to do since with great success, is simply to picture in your mind's eye what usually happens. And I mean, we all have these people or situations that, again, push our emotional hot buttons. Imagine one of those things happening, okay? And a picture reacting to it as you usually do and how you feel afterwards. And it's probably kind of a yucky feeling, okay? Now I want you to picture this same event happening. But now I want you to imagine yourself, really paint the picture. I want you to imagine yourself handling it just beautifully. You're calm, you're in control, you're serene, you're listening to the person without interrupting. And then when it's your turn to speak, you calmly and gently say that perfect thing to, don't worry about the words right now. That comes later. Right now, it's just getting the feeling. And I want you to picture this and feel how you feel afterwards. You take great pleasure in what you've done and how you've handled it. Now, I want you to just keep picturing that, rehearsing it again and again and again, just whenever you get a chance, whenever you think about it. Now, just like an astronaut who, before they go up into space on a mission, he or she will run hundreds and hundreds of simulations. Why? Because when they get up into space, God forbid something happens, well, they've already done it. They've experienced it before. They've been there. They've done that. Now, we know that the human mind, the subconscious, cannot distinguish between what has actually happened and what has been suggested to it again and again. So when you go through these mental simulations of handling the situation beautifully, it's going to make a huge difference. Now, the next time this comes up in real life, you're not surprised. Right. And so now you just mentally said it. You know this, you've rehearsed it, you've seen it, okay? And now you handle it beautifully, just like you've practiced. Now, afterwards, I want you to take pleasure, not pride, but pleasure in how you handled it. Feel good about it, embrace that, and then understand that this means two things. One, if you've done it correctly once, you can do it correctly every time. But two, you won't do it correctly every time because you're a human just like I am and you are, and we all make mistakes, but we'll have plenty of chances to practice. But I'll tell you what, within weeks, I'm telling you within weeks, there will be such a huge difference for you that people will notice this. People will see you as being calmer, being more powerful, being in control, and your influence will right away begin to climb.
I love that. I love that. That is brilliant. Thank you so much for taking the time to give us that action step and exercise to help us move forward. All right. So number two is to listen and step into the other person's shoes. And you have this exercise of listening with the back of your neck. So can you explain that to everyone? What does that mean?
Yeah. We say step into the other person's shoes, and that sounds almost trite because it's a very old saying, right? You think, I can step into the other person's shoes, but then you think about it, right? Most of us have different size feet. So how are we supposed to step into their shoes? In other words, we all come from different ways of seeing the world, different belief systems, different paradigms. And so we can't necessarily step into their shoes. We don't understand them. And remember, just about all conflict is the result of two or more people seeing the same thing from different points of view. That's conflict by its very nature. So how then do we step into their shoes? Well, we ask questions and then we listen. Now, we don't just listen in order to form a comeback, which is what we usually do. And this is what the other mentor, Coach George, said to Jillian, his protege. He said, don't just listen with your ears. That's the surface listening most of us do, right? Listen with your eyes. Listen with your posture. Listen, he said, with the back of your neck. And this is something John, my co-author, came up with. And I had to ask him at first to explain it to me. And he said it's listening with your entire essence. And when you actually picture listening with the back of your neck, it kind of forces you to really put your entire body, your entire being into listening.
Right.
Now, what happens is two things. Again, the two things. One is you understand this person better because you're really listening. The other thing is this person feels listened to because they have been. And as human beings, we want to feel understood. And this helps us to do that.
I love that. I love that. All right. Number 3, smile, set the frame.
Right.
Be ready to reset the other person's negative frame.
Yeah. Natasha, this is so important. Setting the frame, when you've set the frame correctly or reset the other person's negative frame, you're basically 90% of the way there to influencing. What is a frame? Well, a frame is basically the foundation from which everything else evolves. My favorite frame story took place probably 3, maybe 4 years ago. I was at a Dunkin' Donuts restaurant. And there's a little boy about 2.5, 3 years old, a little toddler, and he's running around the restaurant. Well, his parents called him back over to the table. And as he starts walking over there, he takes a spill on the floor. He slips and falls. Now, he didn't hurt himself. He wasn't hurt, you could tell, but he was certainly shocked, okay? This is not something that was a part of his experience. Until now. And so what happened was he immediately looked over to the two people in the world he trusts the most, his mom and dad, for their interpretation of the event. See, what happened. He wanted to know, okay, mom and dad, what now? And I truly believe that had his parents gotten upset or panicky or, oh no, or are you okay? He'd have started crying. But what they did is they just handled it so beautifully. They walked over quickly, but unhurriedly. They were very calm. They smiled at him. They, began to applaud and, oh, how fun. Oh, what a great trick that was, right? And immediately he began to laugh. Now, what the parents did is they set a productive frame from which he could operate. And we can do the same thing when we meet someone. It could be as simple as a smile. Okay. It could be as simple as we're in a conversation with a group. Someone walks in and they'd like to join the group. They don't know though and you kind of open up your body language a little bit to set the frame of course, you're welcome to join us. Okay. Those are fine. Those are pretty easy, right? But what about when someone else comes to the table in sort of a negative frame? You're about to do a sales presentation and this person, we'll say her name is Mary. Well, she's kind of defensive and a bit challenging and, so forth. And, we don't know what has happened that has maybe caused this. So, but we don't want to buy into that frame, right? So let's reset the frame. And what we might do is something as simple as Mary, while we've been able to help a lot of people with this product, whether or not it's the right answer for you, we simply can't know without exploring deeper and determining whether it meets your needs. So please know our conversation is for both of us to discover this. And if it does, great. If not, that's okay too.
That's great. I love that. And that was very powerful, especially in my law practice. It was actually a lesson that I learned. And a lot of times in the law realm, people start with the negative frame. Like I remember in the book, it very much reminded me of many negotiations that I walked into with the waiting, causing people to wait, calling them by the wrong name. And those were all the tactics that never really set up anything productive. So I love this. I love this. So, all right. So number 4, be gracious, communicate with tact and empathy. So what can you tell us about that?
Well, my dad has always defined tact as the language of strength. And I've always enjoyed that because to me, it takes a strong person to speak tactfully, to, again, control their own emotions, not just write that email and send it off without thinking when you're angry, or to try to determine and ask the proper questions, what's going on with another person, making sure you're operating out of the correct frame. I see tact as a way of being able to communicate an idea that normally the other person would find difficult or offensive or whatever it might be, negative in some way. Tact is a way of communicating that makes it so that not only is the person not defensive toward us and resistant to our ideas, but they are open to us and more accepting of our ideas. When you can do that, that's power, that's influence. Now, empathy is what allows us to do this, because empathy, which the dictionary definition is the identification of, with, or vicarious experiencing of another person's feelings. But again, we don't necessarily know how they feel. Okay, as a lawyer, you might be taking someone through a process, and you do it every day. You did it every day, right? But they didn't, and they're nervous, and they don't necessarily know what to ask or what they're supposed to ask. As a coach, you work with people, and I know you help people get tremendous results in their business, but you do it all the time. They come in, it's their first time with a coach or their first time they don't necessarily, right? So empathy doesn't necessarily mean we understand how they feel. It means we understand they're feeling something.
Right.
Okay. And that this something is maybe distressful to them, and we're there to help them. This is so where the step into the other person's shoes is a bit head-to-head logic. This is more an emotional resonance with another person.
Right.
And, we're empathetic, not necessarily just through what we say, although again, that's very important, and not just necessarily how we say it, which again is also very important, but just who we are. And they can tell, they sense when that empathy, when that genuine caring is actually there.
I love that. And that is a very important distinction, that we don't have to have been exactly in their shoes, but that we understand that they are having these feelings and that it may impact them in one way or another. I love that. All right. Now, number 5. I think that between number 1 and number 5, these are two very profound, difficult, and big game-changing principles. So number 5, friends, is trust. Are you ready for this? Let go of having to be right. Wow. And so here's my tough question for you, Bob. Does that mean that we're being inauthentic or lacking in our convictions or principles? Can you just shed a little bit of light on this concept of letting go of having to be right?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you know, in our Go Giver series, John and I typically have 5 laws or principles or secrets or what have you, right? And 4 tend to head in the same direction, and then the last one kind of goes what seems to be opposite until you really dig deep into it, right? Let go of having to be right. Well, again, as you asked, does that mean you don't care about being right? Or isn't that going to make you less influential? Actually, it's not that you don't care about being right. Sure, you care about being right. You want to be right. You desire, you prefer to be right. Okay. But you let go of the attachment to having to be right, or at least 100% right. Okay. And what happens is, rather than make you less influential, it makes you much more influential. Why? Again, I'm going to point out two reasons, if I may. One is, when you let go of having to be right, you go into what we call learner's mode. You allow yourself to be open to ideas you may not have considered. We're human beings. We haven't considered everything, no matter how deeply we've studied something. When you see people, especially in today's political environment, right, and it's typically the people with the loudest opinions have the least knowledge, or all the information they're getting is from their talking heads of choice, okay? And these people are so committed to being right that it's almost like, don't confuse me with the facts. My mind's already made up.
Right.
And so they can't learn that way. You can't learn. And it's the boss, right, who just cannot admit that they're wrong. And we don't respect that person more. We respect the person who can carefully consider and admit when they're wrong. But this doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're letting go of the attachment of having to be right. So first, you're in learner's mode, which means you're able to grow. You're more equipped. Secondly, when you're in a discussion or a debate or a situation with that other person, and they see that you're simply looking for truth, they now become less defensive to you. They become more amenable to your ideas, and you have more influence with this person. We've got to understand something. I think this has been forgotten in today's world, that, and we go back to tact in this case. Tact and or tact and kindness should never be confused with compromise. Okay? We can always speak to someone tactfully and respectfully without compromising our values.
Right.
And I think that's what we need to do.
I love that. And I love the attachment to being right, because I think so many times that's really what this is all about, is we've got this attachment. And I have to tell you that the way that this book gets resolved in the end, I could have never predicted. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but all of a sudden, all the pieces fell into place. And I realized and it has a really powerful ending, because you see that when you go through these 5 steps, that maybe there is an end game that truly is a win-win for everyone, that you may never have even considered had you gone in flying in with heavy emotions, this need to be right, this, failure to listen, and all of that. And you can see the magic that can actually come from demonstrating the principles of true and genuine influence. And so I love this. So, all right, that was absolutely phenomenal. I've got one audience question, because I let my Unstoppable Influence Elite members weigh in. And so I want to ask one quick question from Christy Mancina, who is so sad she could not be here today, but she's going to be waiting for the replay.
Okay. Hi, Christy.
And she says, how do we narrow down who we should focus on influencing when we want to help the whole world? Or should we even think in that way? So this is someone that has a heart of gold, and she wants to help so many people. What is your view on focusing on who it is that you want to influence in that sphere?
Okay, so this is one of those few times that I'm going to say absolutely with something, because I rarely say absolutely. In this case, it's this: it absolutely depends. Okay, because there's
lawyer answer.
Huh? Yeah, because
that's a lawyer answer.
That's right. Because really, I don't know the context or the background of what she's, looking to do. If it's a matter of someone who wants to influence the world to, make sure that everyone in developing countries has fresh water to drink, I'm going to say, yeah, everyone. Start out with a small group and keep, expanding. If it's a matter of business, well, that's where, as you know, when you teach, you find niche markets of people who you can serve and who want to be served and who need, who want and can afford your services, and you start out with them. If you're looking to influence people in terms of wisdom, you reach out to people when you meet them, and you plant the seeds. And if they want to be, if they want to take you up in this, then you work with them. So again, I'm not trying to be evasive, really, but it just depends what it is you're looking to do and how you're looking to accomplish it. The fact is, it's difficult to touch the lives of everyone, but we can touch the lives of the people who we come across and who we're able to touch the lives. But just like anyone in leadership or influence, we want to teach people how to teach people, how to teach people, how to teach people. That's what great leadership, and influence is all about.
The ripple effect.
Exactly.
It's the ripple effect. I love that. All right, let's do a quick drawing here. I'm just going to kind of close my eyes here and let the scrolling do what it does. And the winner is Sky Armijo. Sky Armijo. Sky. Congratulations, Sky. I'm going to mail you a copy of the Go Giver Influencer. If you will email my assistant, Sarah Rowland, at support@unstoppableinfluence.com, we will get the copy of this amazing book out to you in the mail. So congratulations, Sky. And everyone else, I cannot highly recommend this book enough. Everything that Bob does is absolutely top notch. You heard about endless referrals, which has transformed many people's businesses. I mean, millions of businesses have been transformed by this concept of Bob's know, like, and trust factor. If you've heard of that, he's the guy. He's the guy. And so I would also recommend, while you're getting the Go Giver Influencer, go grab the Go Giver if you have not gotten that book. I mean, really, all of them are absolutely phenomenal. And if I were you, I would definitely write down the 5 keys to genuine influence and put them on your desktop. So that way, when you are confronted with situations that someone may not see eye to eye, that you can be always operating with genuine influence by using these principles. So thank you so much, Bob, for sharing your morning with us. Actually, it's probably afternoon where you are, but we just so appreciate your wisdom. I'm seeing all of the comments in the chat box, and one person said, I can't write these notes fast enough. And so everyone is just so beyond appreciative for your time and your wisdom and for your inspiration in writing this book with John, because this is truly a game changer.
Thank you. Well, that just makes me feel so great. Thank you. And thank you for having me on. And again, I appreciate you and all the work you're doing for so many. And, it's funny, you go to your website and you see, and you look at some of the comments online, people just love you, and there's a reason for that. It's because you're doing great things for people. You're bringing exceptional value to the lives of so many people. And, again, just the fact that you and your husband are such great friends with Terry and her husband, says a lot about both couples.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Well, all right, guys, that's what we've got for you today. So make sure you can go and get the Go Giver Influencer on Amazon, and also go check out Bob's website. It's burg.com, and you'll see he's got a ton of different programs and things to really help boost your influence, boost your business, get those endless referrals. Thanks again, Bob. We really appreciate you. And everyone, have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you online. Bye, friends.